Assalamualaikum. Peace be upon to everyone. I am your reporter, Junabay Naron, and in this video, we are going to discuss about Chapter 8, Selecting and Constructing Test Items and Tasks. We have our Learning Outcomes, Section ILO, or Intended Learning Outcomes. At the end of the section, student teachers are expected to construct a valid classroom assessment test for measuring target learning outcomes. Chapter ILO. At the end of this chapter, students are expected to select and construct appropriate test items and tasks for classroom assessment. So we have our session outline. First, categorizing test types. Second, relating test types with levels of learning outcomes. Third, constructing objective supply type of items. Fourth, constructing non-objective supply type. And fifth, we have constructing selected response type. So in this video, we are going to tackle only the first two, the categorizing test types and relating test types with levels of learning outcomes. We have here our table 8.1 menu of test. As you can see on your screen, there are different kinds of tests. We have matching, performance task, binary choice, identification, oral, questioning, extended essay, completion, supply type, enumeration, selection type, and any other more. So in order to categorize those, we have our three chart of test types. So test types have three types. We have supply type, select type, and performance type. Under the category of supply type, we have completion, short answer, essay restricted, and essay expanded. In the second column, select type, under the category of select type, we have binary choice, multiple choice, and matching. On the third column, we have performance type. And under the category of performance type, we have paper pencil, identification, simulated, performance work sample. We should remember that we need to align test types with levels of learning outcomes, such as knowledge, skills, processes, and understanding. It is significant to relate test types with levels of learning outcomes. This is to make sure that we are assessing what is intended to be assessed. We have here a way to measure the knowledge and simple understanding. Talking about the different levels of knowledge, we have declarative and procedural. The declarative is simply about a fact to recall, while the procedural is about applying what you have learned and, of course, manifesting some skills. Now, you study the table refers to the categories of lower order thinking skills. Of course, on the other side, the sample generic questions. So, talking about knowledge, if your goal is to test about knowledge of terminologies, the generic questions is what is a blank. For example, what is science? What is matter? Knowledge of specific facts. The generic questions is when did blank happen? Knowledge of conventions. The generic questions is where are blank usually found? Knowledge of trends and sequences. Name the stages in blank. Knowledge of classifications and categories. The generic questions is which blank does not belong with the others? Knowledge of criteria. By what criteria will you use to judge blank? Knowledge of methods, principles, techniques. When blank increases, what happens to blank? Comprehension. The generic question is what do you mean by the expression blank? Simple interpretation. The generic question is what makes blank interesting? Solving numerical problems. The generic questions is use the data above to find the blank. Manipulating symbols and equations. The sample generic questions is use the data above. I know. Manipulating symbols and equations. The sample generic questions is show that blank equals blank. So I guess this refers to mathematics. So those are the lower order thinking skills and their samples examples of generic questions. Knowledge and simple understanding involve three cognitive levels. As you can see, we have level 1, remembering, level 2, comprehending, and level 3, applying, referring to the lower order thinking skills. While the deep understanding requires three higher cognitive skills, we have level 4, analyzing, level 5, evaluating, and level 6, creating. Still on the same subtopic, relating test types to levels of learning outcomes, alignment of learning outcomes to test types. We have here another table illustrates the relationship between learning outcomes and test types. Test types can be made flexible. It's because we are not limited to only one cognitive level, so test types can be flexible and versatile depending on the different levels of outcomes you are measuring. Like for supply type, as you can see, supply type on your screen could be present from knowledge, knowledge understanding continuum, and deep understanding. When we say essay restricted will limit the possible answer coming from our learner. Like if you would ask the steps in cooking, that is essay restricted because answer will be limited. While for essay extended, it's broad in terms of scope. Usually when we ask opinions, when we ask the reactions of our learner. We have here, so now we have here our box at 8.1. Box 8.1 constructed response type, short answer item, and extended essay. We have here the lower order thinking skills and higher order thinking skills. We go first to lower order thinking skills. And we have our sample question. According to the article, You just read. What factors contribute to climate change? So this is short answer supply type for a simple comprehension questions since it is based on a specific reading materials without citing the source for the response. It could also be a simple recall question. Now we proceed to higher order thinking skills. The sample question is write an article on the on how the government and the community can work together to mitigate the factors causing environmental damage. So this is likewise a supply type, but since it requires a higher order thinking skills at the at the creating level, it will call for an extended essay item. Deeper understanding is necessary to demonstrate this outcome, as it involves synthesis of previous information and observation derived from multiple sources. Still on relating test types with levels of learning outcomes, we have the complex thinking skills. On your screen, you would see the different types of thought questions and the sample item stems. So when we say sample item stems, we are talking about the possible test item or assessment item that we could use targeting the particular type of thought questions cited on the first column. We have the categories of type of thought questions for deep understanding and the sample item stems as you can see on the table. So these sample item stems could be used in constructing test types both for supply and selection type that can elicit complex thinking skills. So these are examples of supply type and selected type that get elicit higher order thinking skills. So for comparing, you may ask the question, describe the similarities and differences between. Compare the following two methods for. For relating cause and effect, you may ask these questions. What are major causes of? What would most likely be the effect of? Then you add a phrase or a word that you like to add. For justifying type of thought questions, which of the following alternatives would you favor and why? Explain why you agree or disagree with the following statement. For summarizing the sample item stems, state the main points included in. Briefly summarize the contents of. For generalizing, formulate several generalizations from the following data. State a set of principles that can explain the following issue. For inferring, you may ask the question these questions. In light of the facts presented, what is most likely to happen when, how, and when? Again, in light of the facts presented, what is most likely to happen when? Then, how would Senator X be likely to react to the following events? So we have our another types of thought questions. For explaining the sample item stems or the possible questions are why did the candle go out shortly after it was covered by a jar? Explain what the president meant when he said the buck stops with me. Persuading. For persuading, uh, the possible questions is write a letter write a letter to the principal to get approval for a class field trip to the state capital. Why should the student newspaper be allowed to decide what should be printed without prior approval from teachers? For classifying the for the classifying types of thought questions, the possible questions is group the following items according to what do the following items have in common. For creating, list, ay, list as many ways as you can. Think of four. Make up a story describing what would happen if. And the last one is applying a principle. And the possible question is using the principle of as a guided. Describe how would you solve the following problem situation. Describe a situation that illustrates the principle. The principle of. Still on relating test types to levels of learning outcomes. We have performance task. So under the performance task, for analyze, you may ask number by the way, these are just examples, okay? These are specific examples, and these are not mean that the examples, the possible performance task could be used for analyze would be limited. Examples listed on your screen. So first, ask them to write analytic memos, like writing one or a two-page analysis of a specific problem or issue. 2. Pros and cons grid, making a list of pros and cons of a decision made. Sorry, my mistake. It's decision made, not mood. Third, the third one is content, form, and function outline. You may ask them to analyzing the what, how, and why of the particular message of an advertisement or commercial. Second, thinking skill is evaluate. You may ask them to write a Marius point, like identifying what students find less clear in lesson, story, demonstration. Second, you may ask them to write a misconception check, like assessing students' prior beliefs that can hinder learning. Third, empty outline. Recalling and organizing the important points of a lecture of reading. Then the third and the last thinking skill is create. You may ask them to write application cards, like designing an application of a learned scientific principle or procedure in a real world. Second, directed paraphrasing, like translating what has been learned in one's own words or form for a specific audience. Third, you may ask them to do or to write a pro- paper or project prospectus, like writing a first structured draft of a paper or project. So that would be all, and thank you for your attention.